All right, can everyone just take maybe 12 seconds and look around the room? What do you see? Because I see some tired faces. I see it's 4 p.m. on the hottest day of the year. It's there's some eyelids getting heavy, I see. So what I want to do when I raise my hand in just a moment, I want everyone to make as much noise as you possibly can. Bang on the floor, stomp your feet, scream. Let's have the neighbors next door complain, okay? When I raise my hand, make the noise, and then when I put my hand back down, silence. Woo! Now look around the room. Smiles, energy. Now we're ready to begin. Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Rivietz, co-founder and chief strategy officer at #Paid.
Yeah, and I'm CJ Hervey with Export Development Canada. And right when we heard about this announcement with TTW, we do a lot of work with Marie, and she called and she said, could you do a case study with one of your clients? And I said, I've got just the guy. I'm going to bring Adam out here and tell you guys a little bit about how we've supported his business over the years and how we can do that for any business that's growing outside of Canada. So yeah, my name's CJ. I was also an entrepreneur for a long time. I was part of growing a digital studio that was sold to Entertainment One, and then started a real-time content studio that did VR, AR, and animation all out of the Unreal Engine. That's still going business a few pivots later, but now I'm in this role at EDC where I run a practice that's basically targeting media and technology businesses, and Adam is the founder of a perfect meshing of those things.
By show of hands, has anyone heard of #Paid? Oh, a few. Okay, hands are going up. Sweet. Okay, for all of you who don't know what we are, #Paid is a creator marketplace. On Thursday, we will be celebrating 11 years. It's when I met Marie in the DMZ, Ryerson, or whatever it's called now, the DMZ there, the incubator. That's where we started. And there's a whole many stories about that. But we are a creator marketplace. That means we help brands like Coca-Cola, Walmart, Sephora connect with content creators to reach new customers. So whether that's finding the right influencer creator, managing the entire process, measuring it all, taking the content and putting it on billboards in Dundas Square, that's what we do. We help the biggest brands on earth connect with new audiences through social media and through content creators.
Yeah, and so the idea today is we're just gonna have a little chat about how the business has evolved, how we've worked on it together. And so we first met through an RBC introduction probably about a year ago now, a year and a half ago. But that wasn't actually the first time EDC and #Paid had worked together or partnered. And we actually found out through that process and understood better that EDC is actually an equity investor in #Paid through our fund to funds strategy. So some of your venture partners have capital from EDC that they deploy. And so I want to just kind of go back to where you were in the business when you first took that outside capital and understand where you were in your international expansion at that time, how important it was to the business, and what that first investment helped you do from your export story.
All right, this will be the longest answer I give because I think it's important to tell the founding story since we're here. So back in the summer of 2014, my co-founder, Brian Gold, our CEO, he's also my best friend since we were 2 years old. We've been best friends for 30 years, and 11 of those we've been running this business. And in the summer of 2014, a girl that we went to high school with, Ronnie, her handle is Inspired to Be Fit. She was one of the first Fitspo accounts on Instagram. And she was going through a difficult time in her life. Ronnie was overweight, unhappy in her skin, wanted to change her whole life around. And she decided to commit to a fitness goal. And how she held herself accountable to that goal was by posting on Instagram. So every time she went to the gym, she'd shoot a selfie. Every time she made a healthy meal, she'd shoot a flat lay. And 6 months later, had 150,000 followers on Instagram. Brian and I were blown away. We're like, how the hell does this girl from the suburbs of Toronto amass this huge following? And we analyze her feed and we realize these people are not just following her. They are asking her, what sports bra are you wearing? What blender are you using? What protein are you drinking? And she would endorse all these products and her followers would write back, bought it, loved it, tried it. And it was my dream to actually move to LA and be Ari Gold from Entourage. If you get the reference, I wanted to be a talent agent. And my best friend was studying media at Western and he said, don't abandon me. We've been neighbors for all of our lives. You don't need to move to LA. There's a new definition of what a celebrity is. It is these people with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers on social media. So we worked with Ronnie that summer. We got her paid by Klipsch headphones and Tom shoes. And that validated our idea that companies would pay random people on social media to post about them. But once we started working with more and more of these content creators, it became a total shit show to manage, where we said we need to develop software to automate the process of finding the creators, collaborating with them, tracking the results, and really scaling the business. And so this all happened in Ryerson's DMZ. And once we started onboarding more and more of these creators, they weren't just from Toronto. They were from the US. They actually ended up being from 100 different countries around the world, some of which I had never even heard of. And at that moment, we said, we can't do it just us two, but we also had no money. So we were looking for ways to fund the business. And coincidentally, a buddy of mine was the brand manager of Mountain Dew and said, hey, can you help us launch Kickstart across the country? And coincidentally, that deal was supposed to be $15,000. It ended up being $25,000, and that extra $10,000 came from a different agency in the room who, when we all left, they were pretty pissed. They're like, this hashtag paid, this new company's taking our budget. They go back to their office, they tell their boss, and their boss calls my co-founder the next day and says, I want to invest. And he wrote us our first check for $25,000, and my co-founder went around the country and sourced what was supposed to be $500K in a convertible note, ended up being $715K over, 2 different closes.
That was two different closes. That was sort of, what would you have called that?
That was
round?
That was an angel round.
An angel round.
Yeah. And so that was, let's go out, let's hire our first salespeople. It was just me doing sales and Brian managing the business at that point. And I think we had a couple contractors and a couple engineers that were working on very little pay and some equity.
Yeah. And so fast forward a little bit, you guys take that capital, you start to grow outside of Canada, you start to deal with bigger brands, bigger creators, and EDC sort of got into the picture at that point because it's our job to help try to minimize risk of, fast growing companies that are expanding outside of Canada. And so we started to work together to look at what's important to your business right now and where can we step in and help support you. So, you had
so we hire those couple salespeople. They do incredibly well in Canada, so much so we went from, I think, $100,000 a month to maybe $800,000 a month in sales. And that was all in Canada. Then we raised actually $1 million seed round, which we said, okay, we've done really well in Canada. Now the next obvious place to go is New York. And so I was flying back and forth every week. We hire a team out there. I end up moving down to New York thanks to the money that was raised. We build our first New York team. There's about 6 of us out there. And that's really when we realized that for us to hit the growth numbers we need, for us to pay back the investors, these 10, 20, 50, 100x returns, that growth is going to need to come from the US. While I can talk about how great it is to build a business in Canada, and I wouldn't be up on this stage if it wasn't for coming to events like this and support from incubators, accelerators, Canadian organizations, we really wouldn't be here. But for the rate you need, you have to expand internationally, the US being right next door, New York being an hour flight away, and the advertising capital of the world. It made sense to go there.
And talk a little more about that. Like, do you feel like even in today's day and age, you needed to have the boots on the ground there in New York? Like it was facing the place kind of thing?
100%. I mean, that was 2015, 16, 17, all to today. And back then, you were not closing $100,000, $1 million deals over Zoom the way you are today. It was very in person. You had to be there because someone at an ad agency or a big brand says, hey, yeah, I'm free for coffee in 2 hours at the end of the day. You want to be there. You don't want to miss that meeting. Going back and forth over email, trying to reschedule, you may never get that opportunity again. So that's why I was there. That's why we built a team and had those boots on the ground. And even to this day, our team now, just flashing forward a bit, like we're 110 people. Half of our team is in the US since the pandemic. We are fully remote. We used to have an office at Adelaide and Peter. We used to host events with TechTO and whatnot. And now we're fully remote, 110 people, 60 or so in Canada, 50 in the US, coast to coast. And the talent pool that you're able to hire from doesn't just have to be from your city or your province. And then you open up doors to conversations, to people, to leaders at companies that we didn't know. I was a dropout from Western. My co-founder studied media, but we started this at 21 and we had no connections to CMOs of the biggest brands on earth. But when you can go to America and hire incredible people who can open those doors for you, it's a huge advantage.
Yeah, and that's another good segue to how you were able to get in with some of those big holding companies and start to get the contracts and grow the contracts and even start to front load them a little bit to grow off your customers, kind of like other people were speaking about earlier today.
For sure. Is anyone in ad tech or martech? Raise your hand. Oh, wow. Surprising. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, there's basically 5 ad agencies that control all advertising dollars. Omnicom, IPG, who are about to merge in the biggest ad agency merger in the last 100 years. Dentsu, Publicis, and WPP. Yeah, so those are the big 5 that own every other ad agency you've heard of, that have offices all along Spadina and Adelaide and all around the US and really globally. And so a shortcut, if you're in ad tech, martech, any type of marketing, is you go to these ad agencies who represent the biggest brands on earth. You sell them on one brand that they work on. And then if you do well, they all tell their friends who work at the agency. And all of a sudden you're working with 5 of the world's biggest brands, not directly, but through this agency. That has its pros of speed and credibility, and you get these logos on your website really quick, but you never actually own the relationship with the brand. So that's why you also have to be pitching brand direct. I just got back yesterday from Cannes in France. Cannes Lions, the biggest ad festival in the world. Everyone's wearing linen, so I kept it going. I feel like it's hotter here than it was there. But so what CJ was mentioning is we work very closely with Omnicom, who's soon to be the biggest holdco in the world. And in Canada, we do a lot of their back of office work. So they have their clients like Canadian Tire, like Sephora. And so they go and sell their clients with our data, with our team on the value of working with creators. But then when it actually comes to executing, our team does the work behind the scenes to make it all come to life. We've been doing that for 6 years. And we said, hey, you know what? You went from spending a few $100,000 to millions of dollars a year with us. Why don't we sign an upfront agreement? You pay us in advance, and we'll have a commercial trading agreement where your clients benefit from discounted rates, and it's mutually a win-win-win for all 3 parties. The thing was, like was said earlier, most startups, even at our stage, 10 years later, we were losing money. And when Omnicom, a publicly traded company, had to look into our numbers to say, are we able to write this check up front? Will you be able to deliver? Will your company even be around in 6 months, a year, 2 years? It didn't look that great. Their insurance provider actually said, for the many millions we want to commit, we can only cover $300,000. And we said, well, that sucks. We can't do that. $300,000 is not worth it for us to give you this value. And so the deal almost fell apart. I called their CFO and I said, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a creative solution. He said, either get your investors to guarantee the money personally, which our board is BDC and Sands Capital. They both said, no, we're not going to do that. But then he said, you can get an irrevocable letter of credit, which I had never heard of. And he said, but you can do it with EDC and RBC. And so I called our banker, who introduced me to CJ, and we went down that process of figuring out how we can structure the deal in a way that we get this letter of credit, which builds confidence in Omnicom that we will be here and that we would be able to pay them back if anything ever happened.
And so what's really happening there is you have the balance sheet of a crown corporation coming in to support a fast-growing Canadian company and guaranteeing to the holding company that if this company goes away, the government of Canada is going to make good on that debt, right? So it's basically just an insurance policy that gets bought against that contract, and we're there to support that growth, right? EDC is always trying to find ways to free up growth capital for companies, help free up liquidity. In that case, the money would have been parked in a GIC somewhere that you wouldn't have been able to get at, but we can get in there so that you can have access to really grow your business and make sure you're doing what you need to do.
I will also say, because I know there are investors in the room and who knows when we might need to raise money next, we are profitable now for the last year and a half, which is fantastic. So that's a major milestone. Yeah. It took us 9.5 or 10 years to do it, but we are on that journey, which we'll talk about in a moment. But it gives us optionality. That's what our board wanted. That's what BDC wanted. That's what Sands Capital wanted. That's what Brian, my co-founder, and I wanted. And optionality means that we could grow the business organically now that we're making money, or we could raise around, or we've hit certain milestones where companies like Omnicom could consider buying us now. So that's all they said. They're like, we're not going to push you in any one of those three directions. That's up to you guys to decide how you want to continue scaling the business. But they said you must become profitable because the macro environment has changed since we started the company in 2013, 14.
Yeah, it really went from growth at all costs to...
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here has seen
faster.
Silicon Valley, and literally the first 10 episodes of that show were us in 2014. And it's wild to just how back then BetaKit, every news outlet was talking about how sexy and cool it was to raise all this money and grow top line revenue, even though you're losing money. And then since 21, 22, that completely shifted. And that's why the biggest companies are doing layoffs, restructuring. And that's why the last 2 years, we completely rejigged our operations to become profitable and be in this position where we have options.
Yeah. And so as you go forward now, with that profitability, what do you think's next? What's the future hold? And, I know EDC is probably waiting in the wings to take a look at that equity position again now, but where do you see this going next?
Yeah, I mean, I just said we just got our entire leadership team, 11 of us plus 2 content creators. We're just in Cannes for the last week at the biggest ad festival. It's wild. You see Meta, Google, Microsoft, TikTok, Snap. They're spending tens of millions, if not $100+ million to set up these wild activations for 50+-year-old marketers to be wowed and wined and dined and commit their billions of dollars of ads for next year. It's literally corporate Coachella. It was insane to see for my first time, and now that's the place we'll have to be every year moving forward. So what we're thinking about now is further international expansion. We started in Canada. We expanded to the US about 5-6 years ago. And now 75-80% of our business comes from the US, but there's more markets. Europe is massive, and that's where we're setting our sights now or next. The UK, they speak English. It's very simple to run ads in our native language. The only difference is the time change, which is one of the operational things we're going to have to work out. But yeah, we're definitely looking at other markets, whether that's Europe or Brazil with the most social media usage in the world, or Australia, where we have a couple competitors that aren't doing that well, that we could probably dominate their market. So yeah, we're looking into other markets, and whether we fund it organically or through a partner or through an investor, that's one of our next sort of uses of capital.
Yeah, perfect. So we knew this was going to go fast. We knew we could fill up 20 minutes pretty easily talking about the journey that #Paid's taken and how EDC's been able to plug into it. I think more than anything, the takeaways are just kind of to understand that once your business is growing outside of Canada and you have revenue, there really is a path to seeing the Crown Corps step in and help support. That's what they're here to do. That's what the mandate is. Like for our business, if we can show money in, money out, money in, exports out, then there's a case that EDC should always be involved. And it really has gone in this instance right from early stage funding through to working capital solutions. There's financing for acquisitions, opening offices. Like there's lots and lots of ways that we can support. And
I will say that you don't have to be, we raised our Series B in 2021. You don't have to be at our stage to consider venture debt or partners like EDC who can support you based on your balance sheet or assets you have or whatever it might be. And I mean, I've invested in a handful of companies. I advise a dozen or so. And again, that shift from 2014 till now, raising venture is not necessarily the right move for every company. And depending on what your personal goals are, the business goals, there are plenty of partners that can help support you to keep that equity so that when you do have an exit, it's meaningful and life-changing for you, your co-founders, your team. So think about it.
Let's go do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Does that take us to the end? Do you want us to take some questions?
We're going to do a couple questions.
Okay.
Put the questions on Slido. It's Alex back here. So I have some. I'll take one right now from Slido for you guys. First one's, how do you convince investors to keep investing even though you were not profitable until recently?
Oh, it'd be a better question for my co-founder, our CEO, who deals with all the investors. But no, it's showing growth. Like we spoke about it earlier. Just because you aren't profitable doesn't mean that your business isn't growing. I'll share, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've done 50 to 75% year over year growth. Venture funds want to see, I don't know, there's plenty of them here, I'm sure, at least, I think, 30, 40+% growth year over year. And if you can do that, it means you're doing the right thing. You clearly found product market fit. People clearly want what you are selling. And then it just takes some restructuring, some maybe changes in your operations to become profitable. But growing that top line is a great leading indicator that your business is great and that you're on the right path to eventually becoming profitable.
Yeah, and what I've witnessed you guys doing is you were closing that delta too, right? Like you were growing quickly on the top line, and then you were also, narrowing in on the cash flow.
Yes,
So
if you are
everything was
losing
growing,
less
right?
money
Yes.
year over year, then that's also the other flip side of the coin where you're growing.
The business
but
is
you're also
growing,
losing
but
less.
it's costing less money to run it that way. That's what everybody likes to see, because that shows that it should be able to carry on.
Yes, you extrapolate it and throw it on a spreadsheet and you show what 2, 5, 7 years from now will look like.
Cool.
Yes. What other questions?
Any other questions before I go to Slido? Because the other one's about, U.S. subsidiaries, which we can wait because I think we've talked about that already. So any other questions? Because otherwise I'll go with, okay, let's go with this one here.
When you initially started, I can't remember the numbers. I think you said you went from 100,000 MRR to 800,000 MRR when you hired the sales team. How fast did that hit when that happened?
That was like in 9 months. We went from that $715K round that got us out of the DMZ to that $1 million seed. It was a year later, but because the numbers had grown, 6, 9, 10 months, like it was under a year. Yeah. So find the right sales. We got lucky. I mean, since those 2 sellers, we've hired 65 other sellers and we've got 10 of them on the team. Maybe 200 sellers. I don't know. You got to find the right people. You, depending on your growth stage, depending on where you're at, what market you're in, who you're selling to. I think we got very lucky with those first 2 sellers. But in the US, it was not that easy. We went through dozens of sellers before we landed on the team now that actually caused the flippening of more US business coming in than Canadian business. One of them turned 40 a couple of years ago, made a bunch of money in crypto, and is living on the beach in Ibiza with his influencer girlfriend. And the other one is still on our team and is our #1 salesperson and just celebrated 9 years with the company. Yeah.
On that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. Can I get a round of applause?
Thank you.